Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Fearless Floyd Show. As always, I am your host, Fearless Floyd. And as you see from the thumbnail and the title, we're back with Noel Benoist, former NSA whistleblower, 13th seat on Majestic 12. This is part 3 of the Kennedy Brothers series. We've covered John F. Kennedy, Robert F. Kennedy. This video will cover Edward Kennedy, fondly known as Teddy Kennedy. So apparently they all had nicknames. It didn't even go with their name. It's real weird because they called John F. Kennedy Jack. But Jack was, I think, the older brother who passed away, if I remember correctly. So I could be wrong. But anyway, we are here back with Noel for part 3. We will continue the interviews, the pedagogy of Noel. If you don't know what the word pedagogy means, basically the life of. There you go. You learned a new word today. That's in the banner. So Pedagogy of Noel. That's the name of the book that I'm co-authoring with him. And that's what you're a part of right here watching this video. This is Noel's story, his story, and we're going to document it together. We're also going to cover Martin Luther King, that assassination, which happened April 6th of 1968. And then June 5th, 1968 was when Robert F. Kennedy was assassinated by Sirhan Sirhan, which we covered in part 2 of this video. We're also going to get into Jacqueline Bouvier, or as affectionately known, Jackie or Jackie O, as she became, but Jackie Kennedy, Jacqueline Onassis. We're also going to cover Marilyn Monroe. And then we're going to do some deep diving into MK Ultra, the Warren Commission report, how the NSA was created, Roswell, the Church Committee, and I'll see what else, what other kind of juicy tidbits I can dig up from the early, we'll just say the 60s and the early 70s, and then maybe beyond. But that's the timeline when Noel was involved with Majestic 12. If I remember correctly, it's he said 65 to 68, 3 years, but those are almost like 3 decades with some of the stuff that he'd accomplished while being a man in black. Noel was a man in black. As you've seen the movie with Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones, that's a real thing. And you're getting ready to see the real thing. So, I'm always very humbled and honored to have him on the show. If you haven't read his book, The 200-Year Plan, that he co-authored with the late FBI whistleblower Ted Gunderson, who died under mysterious circumstances. Go check that book out, 200-Year Plan. They're hard to find. Apparently, there's 2 editions. We'll talk about that, hopefully, if we remember in this video. If you have any questions for Noel about his life or about something he may or may not have been involved in, leave a comment below or email me at thefearlessfloydshow@yahoo.com. So we're going to cover some other things. I made it official today, by the way. I picked up some ISBN accounts, numbers basically, international standardized book numbers. So now any book that I publish or author or co-author, I already have serial numbers in place, ready to go. So all I got to do is get it completed, edited, ready for print, copyrighted, printed out on the open market. So I'm officially a publisher. Officially. It's serious square business now. All right. I will be. Oh well. Let me address this. If you have somebody that has a compromised immune system and may need some supplements to support that immune system and improve their constitution, check out Mushroom Therapy, fearlessfloydpets.com. If you would have any questions about these products are for humans, cats, dogs, and livestock, including equine, horses. There was, I didn't see it. I guess they're out of it, but they had a limited edition Christmas special of blueberry something, blueberry crumble coffee. So okay, guess that stuff went pretty quick. So if you need anything or you have any questions about any of those products that you just saw for yourself, your pet, your livestock, email fearlessfloydpets@gmail.com. Kristen or Diana will be more than happy to answer your questions, talk to you on the phone, or whatever it takes. So we can get healthier again and make America healthy again. Yay. Just love doing commercials. So yeah, that's Fearless Floyd Pets at gmail.com or fearlessfloydpets.com is the website that you can go to. Choose your products, put them in the cart. It's Christmas. bundle up, support yourself, your family, your pets, as well as your livestock. So hopefully your livestock puts some type of enjoyment or benefit into your life some way, somehow. So we should all take care of them. And I will be back with Noel Benoist. Hang tight. And I am back with Noel Benoist. Hello, Noel. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
All right. Today's show, as I've already interluded to, we're going to talk about the late Senator Edward, affectionately known as Teddy Kennedy. This is part 3 of the Kennedy brothers series. And Noel, let's dive into Edward Kennedy.
Yeah. Well, after John and Robert are both gone, basically, Edward Kennedy, he moved a little slower than the other two, tried to be a little wiser, and he tried to, say, throw off the enemy a little bit. But they picked up on the direction he was going in. And he made a few alliances. And matter of fact, he got together with John. And of course, John started his magazine or paper there, George. And he actually coached John on basically being sly. And that's why they actually got rid of John, because John made like he wasn't going to go for president or anything. But he was actually in all of the areas and posed perfectly for becoming president. And a big part of that was coaching from Ted, basically talking about some of the mistakes that John and Robert made. And then Ted was going to go for it and try to open the door for John. And at the time, I had made seat 13 by then. And so we had a meeting, and they said, well, Ted Kennedy's going to be going for president. He's been trying to tell us he's not going in that direction. He's been trying to throw us off, but we know he's going in that direction. And they said that they had more than enough to indicate that he had also been coaching John. And I said, well, what's the problem with that? And that's when actually they confessed to everything that was done with John and with Robert. And I had approached them on it before as far as some of that stuff. And I had already looked into some of the paperwork. So I knew that there was something there. I hadn't actually picked up like Lucian Sardi's name or anything yet. And then actually one of the guys steered me to the box in the room I called Pandora's box. There was a box of records in there.
Who is Lucius you just mentioned?
Lucian Sardi was the French paid assassin who was given Secret Service credentials. And he is what the policeman in Dallas thought was the Secret Service agent behind the fence. The Secret Service agent behind the fence that the Dallas police started to interview and then saw he had Secret Service credentials. And the cop said that there was a black briefcase on the hood of the car. And that was actually Lucian Sardi, French paid assassin. On that one, they did a independent hiring. It was a mob referral, but they decided to hire that's MJ12.
Okay.
Yeah, the boys. For me, when it comes to they hiring and all that, that's the 12.
I just have to clarify.
Yeah, right. I know.
That's all.
I know. That's for the people too. So you hear me say and we're talking about this stuff. It's the 12. And other than that, I'll use names like Lucian Sardi or whatever.
Right.
I lump those 12 into one evil lump. That's why I just refer to them as they. I don't think they even deserve the respect of having their names used or known, but they
Right.
do need to be known. And, so anyway, and then one of the guys at the meeting, they said, hey, they talked about how Kennedy was going to defund MJ-12 and expose a bunch of their stuff. And that's why they orchestrated his death. At that point in time, they just said they orchestrated his death and encouraged it. And I said, what in God's green earth for? And then that's when they said, hey, we encourage and cause wars, and we have trained people who then become terrorists. And they told me how they just have the CIA train them and everything, and then they'll go ahead and stab them in the back and get them angry at the U.S. And I said, why? And they said, because Kennedy said that there was enough peace in the world that MJ-12 was not needed anymore. And Kennedy was proposing his space exploration world partnership to unite the world as a business and partnership deal, with each country being able to run their country and each country having a portion of this partnership. And he wanted to go back to basically the value of the metal in the coin, etc., and use the gold and silver and platinum standards, and knowing that the value would go up. As the value goes up, basically you're not getting the inflation. If you buy a let's say a wheelbarrow full of bread with a $5 gold coin back in the 1800s, and then that $5 gold coin today would buy a few wheelbarrows full of bread. So actually, instead of inflation, you could actually be on the positive side of things, and the wealth of everybody in the world would grow, especially then once we get space exploration going and we start adding wealth from other planets. As a matter of fact, that's part of what other planets have done here. They've come here and gotten some of the valuable metals and everything that we have that they need for some of their ships, etc. And our guys made deals with them on some of that stuff. The matter of fact, there's been talk about a big underground base in the ocean, and they've got the what they call them now, unidentified submersible objects, USOs. And there's one trench that is so deep our stuff has never been able to go to the bottom of it, and it would be crushed. But aliens have the technology to be down there, and down there they've got mines going on and mining going on, extracting metals. They can extract them a lot better and easier than we can with their technology. And so the powers at be overlooked that, and they tried to get the aliens to kind of stay out from being underfoot of humans too much, because it caused a lot of focus, and too many people were having experiences, which then people start saying, hey, maybe there's something to this alien stuff, and our government's lying to us. And I told them when I was in, I said, look, guys, we can't lie to the people. We've got all kinds of stuff saying that they've been out there for thousands of years or whatever. And in the Bible, angel means messenger from God. And people a lot of times confused things, or aliens or whatever that have more power than man. They called them God. Some of those beings were angels created by God that fell. That's the bad ones. And then we got the good ones. And undoubtedly, God has other creatures or beings that he created in other areas of all these universes that he created. And we'll know more later. That's one of the reasons Paul said we know in part and we see in part. But once we're with God and everything gets finished, we will know as we are known. And that's one of the things God showed me. I've actually had been blessed with trips to heaven, like the old time prophets. And I saw a lot of the stuff that they saw, and actually was telling people in my hometown about it before I ever read about it. And this one Pastor Hendricks called me, and he asked me about some of the things I'd seen and what I had read or studied and everything. And I said, well, in church, all I ever got was the kids' teachings. And so then he showed me where in the Bible where some of these things were. And he knew because of my description without ever having read it that my experiences were real. And one of the things that I have a hard time with now, when we are no longer in this body and we're in our celestial new body and we're with God in heaven, etc., everything is instant. And since I've been there a number of times, and I kind of bring some of that back with me. So some of my blood pressure and stuff is caused because I want to do too many things too fast. You know, I love that in heaven when things are instant. If you need to know something, you know it instantly. If you wanted to be with somebody or a group of people, it's instant. You know, you could be here 1 millisecond and be in the furthermost outreaches of space a millisecond away. It's definitely unworldly. And so some of that stuff kind of stayed with me. So I would like to do things on Earth a whole lot faster than what we do. but I got to realize we can't, not yet. And so we had these discussions about some of this stuff and how Kennedy was going to have the space exploration and partnership and everything. And that's when they said, we will prove to this world that they can never be without us. We will never allow this world to have no need for our group. MJ12 had to be basically the head and everything else of the body, which makes them trying to replace God. And that is, Satan wants to exalt himself above God. And that's their whole plan. That's the satanic plan, is they want humankind and everything that is to be dependent on them. And they are willing to kill, lie, steal, destroy reputations of good people. They will do anything to get there. And matter of fact, that's why when I was going to run for the Senate, and they said that they would basically destroy the opponent by rumors and then charges just before the election, so people would be afraid to vote for them. That's when they said all's fair in love, war, and politics. And I had already heard that from MJ12. And so with smear and fear plus that statement, I told them, I said, you guys have made a deal with MJ12. And they said, yeah, we're going to be the leaders. And they said, MJ12 can be like the Congress and Senate put together, and we'll run everything for them. And I said, nah, it doesn't work that way. You know, we formed a nation that is supposed to be by the people, for the people, of the people. And that's when, I mean, we got into even, and at the meeting, I got into some of the prices of a pair of pliers. And I was at the meeting when they decided what to do with the gold. Once Doc Noss found the gold in the treasure room in White Sands, New Mexico, they kicked him off the base. And then before he could get his permits renewed and everything, they emptied out the treasure rooms. And there were priceless artifacts in there and everything that just, to me, it was a crime against humanity to melt them down.
Okay, yeah, that's way off Edward Kennedy.
But actually, see, Ted knew about a lot of this stuff, and so in many ways, that's why he knew that John wanted to basically set a lot of that stuff right. And they had already done the White Sands, New Mexico thing before they did Ted in. And Ted, if he got president, was going to basically expose that and try to save the rest of the artifacts. And they basically said, there is no way in hell that's going to happen. And I said, how are you going to stop it? I said, yeah, I told him, I said, you guys told me that, and just not too long before that, that you could not shoot another Kennedy because people would really cue in on, wait a
See a
minute.
pattern.
Yeah, they shot 3 of them, and I said, you can't shoot another Kennedy. What are you going to do? And they said, speed and PCP will absorb through the skin. And I said, we've got his psychological profile, his physical profile, and there's going to be a party at Chappaquiddick on the island there. And they said, we got Mary Jo Kopechne, I think her name was, and we paid her $5,000 up front, promised her $70,000 waiting at a bank at like the Cayman Islands or something like that. It was one of those islands where there's no extradition and you could bank there and they wouldn't be reporting it to the American government. And then we promised her $75,000 a year every year after that. And she's going to go to Kennedy and tell Kennedy that she left her pregnancy medication at her home and they've got to go to her home. There's no time to tell anybody or anything. And they let them drive over there normal, but then they got into his car and dusted the steering wheel with the strength of PCP that they knew he would then touch it enough times that absorbed through the skin, and at Chappaquiddick is where he would OD. So they knew when he OD'd and saw all these boats on the water that he would basically hallucinate like he was in a boat. And off he goes into the water. And I said, well, what about your agent, Mary Jo? She's expendable. I said, so in other words, you don't really plan on paying her or having her go to an island. They said, not unless she makes it out alive. Then we'll take care of her for a while. And then she'll drown, have a scuba diving accident, or one way or another, the liability will be gone. And that's just, and they were just, matter of fact, totally ice cold about the whole thing. And I told him, I says, man, I said, guys, this is wrong. And I told him, I said, with what you guys did to John, and then you're doing this kind of crap. And I said, I'll wait and watch. And I said, we'll have another meeting later on. Well, when they really did it, and I saw they did it, and they didn't listen to me or anything else, as far as like saving some of those artifacts, etc. I said, guys, basically I said, what you guys want, you want my brain, and I said, you don't really respect me for me or as a leader. You want what I'm able to do. And they said, well, hell yeah. And I said, I'm out of here. And they said, you process through personnel and we will reactivate you as soon as you walk out the other side. I said, no, you won't. They said, yeah, we will. They said, you signed a contract and that contract is for life. They said, we'll use your brain in a jar. We'll use you in a wheelchair. I said, no, you won't. They said, you process through personnel and you find out. Yes, we will.
What?
And that's when they told me how many millions they had spent schooling me and watching me and keeping track of me so the enemy couldn't kidnap me and all that. And
so you're going, well, I'm sure
yeah.
I can wrap my head around what you just said.
Yeah.
You said it so quick and so nonchalantly, like, it's water cooler talk. So literally they could like decapitate your head, then put your head in a jar, and then all the electrodes and feeding tubes and
They basically said, I could cooperate, or one way or another, they said it doesn't matter if you die of old age or what, they literally said they had the technology back then to basically extract intelligence and stuff from brains. They were already experimenting with various brains being
and
able
what
to
year was
get.
this?
Pardon?
What
Well,
year was this?
that was 68.
60. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yep.
Okay. Carry on. Yeah, I just want
Yeah,
to make sure.
and they said they were making more advancements all the time, and they said, basically, if they had to put me under house arrest, they'd keep me as long as they did, and as soon as the technology was where they wanted, I would be expendable.
Makes sense.
Yeah, and but the neat thing is they didn't plan on. See, I wasn't the pilot of my plane; I was the co-pilot, and my pilot was God, and God knew where we were flying, how we were flying, and everything, because I had already met a German national, and I knew as soon as I saw her, I knew I was going to marry her. And matter of fact, I told this one guy, I said, "Well, I met my wife today," and he said, "Well, was it love at first sight?" I said, "Not really." I said, "It was just a knowing that I'm going to marry her." And I said, I'll love her. And she's pretty and she's intelligent. And she was extremely intelligent too. And matter of fact, she was actually, she worked for the Scheffler Needle Bearings and Scheffler Tapestries. And the Scheffler factories, the two brothers in Herzogenaurach. And anytime a floor boss was gone or sick, they would put her in as the boss. And she was the boss of every floor every time somebody was sick. And otherwise, if you came into Scheffler and wanted to see one of the Scheffler brothers, she was the first one you saw and dealt with. And she was 17 years old. Now that's fast track. So it was like I was fast track and I just met my fast track wife. But and they had requested that I wait until we could, and I'd put in for a security clearance for her, and they wanted to make her then like say a German agent or whatever and use her if they cleared her and we got married. See, well, nobody ordered me not to marry her. So I put in for leave. I went to her and I said, we're going to move the wedding up. I told her parents, I said, we're moving the wedding up. I said, this weekend we're going to the Burgermeister and we're going to get married with the Burgermeister. And I said, then we're going to do the military wedding and paperwork. And then we're going to take our honeymoon. And then I'll tell you the rest of the story when I get back, And so we did. And so then when we got back off the leave, I went into S2, G2, G4, and S4 and all that. And I told them, I told you guys I'm out of here. They said, we told you we'll reactivate you. And I says, I told you, no, you won't. And when I said, when you guys said, how do you figure? I told you to watch me. You didn't watch me. And I threw the papers on the desk. I said, I'm married to a German national. I'm a security threat. Mandatory. You got 30 seconds to transfer me. Boom. Ties were cut. And they couldn't stop it. So the next day they transferred me into regular Army. I was still at Herzl base, but we had some regular Army people there. They transferred me into regular Army. I was there undercover as a Spec 4. So they came up with a bogus reason to bust me and transferred me into the Arts and Crafts unit as a private E2.
Arts and Crafts unit.
Yeah.
That's probably a little misnomer towards what it's actually is all about. So tell us what arts and craft in the military is all about.
Well, and I got a kick out of it because for my job, it was an art and you had to be crafty.
I would imagine. We're not talking about paper mache, are we?
Yeah. Nope. No. And but the neat thing was God was working there too, because then they put me on the command sergeant major's detail. Now they know I got a bad back. I got a partially herniated discs, and I've got missing disc C2, C3. So they put me on a command sergeant major's detail with a command to paint all of the baseboards at headquarters. So I'm supposed to be bending over and stuff, right?
Right.
Well, I went down to the supply, and I got the backs of the 8.5 by 14 legal pads, and I got that cardboard, and I got about 4 of those, and I put the paint on one, put my knee on it, and then I take another one, and I'm going along using it for an edger, and I'm dipping paint and using the one on my knee and the one up on top side, like you would use tape, so I got good edges. And as fast as I can scoot with my other leg, I'm painting the baseboards. Well, Command Sergeant Major McLean came out, and he says, "Damn, Benoist, you do good work." I did, even with my disabilities, I did 3 floors of the headquarters in an hour and a half. All the baseboards. And I said, "Well, Sergeant Major," I said, "my dad told me, he taught me one way. He said, you do your best and the rest will take care of itself." And he says, "Are you surprised I know how to pronounce your name, Benoist?" And I said, "No." He said, "I said a lot of guys in the military and stuff pronounce it Benoist, English Benoist, French Benoist. But I said, there are people who know the French pronunciation." He says, "Well, what are you doing Friday?" And I said, "I got nothing planned." He said, "Here's my address. Come down to my house. We're going to have dinner together." So next day he put me on, they were doing bleachers. And so I worked with them on the bleachers. And I think that was like Friday. And we finished the first set of bleachers that Friday. Went down to the Sergeant Major's house for dinner. And he says, "Have a seat." He said, "I'm going to tell you a little story." He says, "I knew how to pronounce your name because one of the commanders I had was a man I had the greatest respect for, and he was the best commander I've ever known in my entire life, and I was an E6 under his command." I said, "What was his name?" He says, "Thomas Malcolm Benoist." I said, "That was my dad." So he had been an E6 in my dad's command. And my dad's command loved and respected him so much, when he went from the East Coast to Fort Ord, he bought the first house on 17 Mile Drive when you first drive in. And his whole command requested 30 days of leave. He said, "Well, I can't give everybody leave at the same time." He said, "I'll give 2/3 of you leave while I'm here. And then I'll give the other third leave starting when the other 2/3 come back." When he showed up at his house, they had completely remodeled, repaired the house, and the other third were there doing the entire yard and everything. They completely redid his whole setup so that he had a beautiful home to live in and to move into. That's how much they respected him. Wow. And so Command Sergeant Major McLean was my guard. He watched my back. Yep.
All right. So let's get into Kennedy.
Yeah.
So the entire, apparently you're telling me it's a assassination attempt, correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
Who set that up? MJ-12?
MJ-12 said they every assassination of every world leader that we know of has actually been MJ-12 involvement in their group. Illuminati, Knights Templar, The Knights Templar did some of that stuff too. That's how they became basically the first world bank. And that's why then when the Catholic Church got big and powerful, then they put a few kings together and started going after the Knights Templar, because the Knights Templar were out to rule the world. You know, trying to rule the world has been going on, you know, for thousands of years.
Since organized religion.
Alexander the Great actually ruled the world for 3 days. And then because he had no more countries to conquer, he died in his bed weeping.
Right. Died in his bed weeping. Okay. All right. So MJ-12 ran the assassination attempt on Senator Edward Kennedy. So why, what dissuaded them from further attempts?
After Ted, well, number one, or after like John and Robert, and then they did the number on Ted Kennedy. And with Ted Kennedy, there were a lot more questions. And the thing is, there was no FAA investigation as to why that plane went down. Media started getting on it. How is it that like four people in a plane?
You're talking about John Jr.
Yeah, John Jr.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, or Ted. Yeah, Ted and John Jr. both caused the media to start getting more involved. Like with Ted, you know, how is it that Ted Kennedy doesn't know where Mary Jo Kopechne, or that she's in his car and where his car is? Because the first people that came to Ted Kennedy said, hey, your car is over here at Chappaquiddick in the water and Mary Jo Kopechne's in it. And he's like, what are you talking about? Because when they come down off of PCP, they got amnesia. Well, doctors examined Ted, and doctors actually validated the fact that, hey, he cannot remember from here to here. He has amnesia. And I think they probably did some blood tests. And if they did some blood tests, then PCP would show up.
Okay.
So,
go ahead.
Yeah. So then basically that started, you know, the Kennedys, they gave the Kennedy family a little more evidence. It caused media to look a little further into things. And then more or less that whole thing there, you know, they tried to chill for a while. And then they more or less made a mistake by going after John, because there were a lot of questions there. Why did the plane go straight down? Why didn't somebody grab the stick? And they had all of these excuses in a heavy fog. You can't tell if you're going down or up. You got an altimeter on sitting right in front of you. You can't tell in a heavy fog if you're going down or up. Then you can't read an altimeter. If that altimeter is going 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, you're going down.
Right.
You know? Yeah. So those two strokes, what they did with Ted and what they did with John, that put them in much more of a box, you know. And then of course we had things that happened with Reagan, and that kind of set things up for Trump. See? And then all the stuff there with the election fraud and everything else have set things up for where we are today. That the problem is, if DC doesn't learn by all that history, these guys will sleep for 20 years and let a new generation forget about all of that, and they will come back at it again. So if we don't basically put an end to them and block, we're not going to be able to block them from the whole world, but we can block them from Israel, from America, and from any countries that want to align themselves with Israel and America. And that's what we need to do, because then Israel and America will be a safe place for God's children.
Right.
That's how they can be kept from suffering.
Right. This is a movie over on Amazon Prime. I've already watched it because when I knew this video was coming up, and I did my homework, did my research, and I'm not going to play it. I'm just going to show it to you. But this is it right here. And according to everything that you have just told me, it is spot on with the movie, except for the drugs.
Yeah, they didn't find the drugs because the seawater washed the drugs away.
Well, it wasn't in the movie. They, sorry about that. Edward knew that he had wrecked. He knew that she was in the car. He knew that she was drowned, and he ran back and left her there. And then, acted like nothing ever happened, and he didn't know anything about it. Like
that's the accusers. See that, and that's the MJ-12 stand in order to discredit Ted. That's their smear and fear. But in actuality, in truth, I know because I talked to one of the guys one time. It was one of the first ones that went, and I forget what his name was, but he was one of the first ones that went and saw Ted the next day. And he said when Ted answered the door and stuff, Ted was completely and totally confused. When they talked about Mary Jo, Ted couldn't even remember being at the party.
Wow. They laced him up good.
Yeah. See? And the thing is, if people check, they started out with PCP as being elephant tranquilizer. Then they used it for pregnancies, and people can check this out with doctors, etc. When they used it with pregnancies, they would bring the baby in, and a woman would not even remember 9 months of pregnancy. She'd say, "What do you mean? I've never been pregnant. That's not my baby." And that is also when some of those women and stuff were then trying to fly out of hospital windows thinking they were a bird.
That's crazy.
Yeah. See? So, and that's why that movie, they cover it up and try to make Ted look bad still, when in actuality, all of the Kennedys, A to Z, were as innocent as a lamb.
Yeah.
Other than the booze runner.
That definitely shed a bad light on Teddy for sure. Made him really look bad. But now that we have the true story, you're expressing it.
That's right.
Yeah.
And after Ted ran up against all that and went through all that, that's why he basically became an alcoholic and tried to basically do as much as he could in DC and get as much as he could out of it. And at that point, he just kind of gave up.
Which most senior senators do when they get a young, aggressive, eager junior senator in there as well. That's what happened here in Texas with John Cornyn and Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz got in there and stole all the fire out of John Cornyn. John Cornyn's just riding it out.
Yeah. Yeah. Matter of fact, on Ted Cruz, I pulled my endorsement of Ted Cruz because he is too much like a senator that MJ-12 would basically be dealing with. He's cocky, hot-headed, high-minded, and I think that he is actually a Republican traitor.
It could be. I don't know for sure. He was the Solicitor General for the United States. So you definitely have to, have an allegiance towards the corporation to be in that position. And that's kind of was his launch pad to his current position.
Yeah.
I'm sure he'd love to be the senior senator from Texas, but is what it is.
Well, I was a psychological profiler, and I profiled CIA, I can recognize them real easy. I profiled MJ12, and that's why we've got to work on JD Vance, because he's got some MJ12 buddies, and I think he might be right now deceived like I was at first, but he's got some connections there. So he's
JD,
got the potential of going either way.
JD
JD,
Vance,
the vice president.
elect.
That's why when he was chosen vice president, before the first assassination attempt, I told Laura and Don Jr. they're going to try to kill Donald. And when the first assassination attempt failed, I said they're going to try again, and they will keep trying all the way through. And I could give you some communications I sent to Donald. I told him, don't let anybody get near you with any kind of open fluid in their hand. Don't let anybody get near you if they're wearing, say, a plastic glove with a glove on top of it, because they'll get Ryzen from the North Korean guy. He used Ryzen on his sister, and they will try to splash Ryzen on Trump or try and touch him with a glove that has Ryzen on it in order to kill him. And I told him, and I said, you need to put the Secret Service on notice. He can hug people that he really knows, that he really trusts and everything, but he is going to have to keep distance from anybody and everybody else. He cannot be that guy that just reaches out and shakes your hand. If it's a bare hand, yeah, because if it's got Ryzen on it, the guy's going to die before he shakes your hand. But yeah, it's going to take extreme extra guard. And I told him too, I said, you get me with you. If I'm side by him and somebody pulls a gun, I would not hesitate in the blink of an eye to step between him and the gunman and then let him try to pull the trigger on me. Number one, I think God would stop it. Number two, if I took a bullet for the president, I believe I would live through it. And I am not afraid of taking a bullet.
Yeah, I guess you can put me in that boat as well.
Or a knife. I took an 18-wheel truck that left. I've got scars all over my body. So if I took an 18-wheel truck and went flip-flopping down the road and in this gravel and everything else, you betcha. Yeah. And they were talking bone grafts and skin grafts and muscle grafts. And I told them to get me a couple of salves and beeswax that from Switzerland or Sweden, and basically back on my feet.
Right.
Yeah. Well, another thing you can look up one time too is the original 12, and I've got some stuff in some of my pictures somewhere, but it's kind of buried. And we can talk about those 12, and if you look up, 3 or 4 of them died within the first 4 or 5 years.
Right. Yeah, you were saying that in the part 1 video.
Yeah, and we could basically do that research and then get the names, because after my week of lost time, I recognized them when I saw an article that Chief's wife sent me, and I recognized, I think, 3 of them that I knew they were, they went early. So, yep.
Okay, so it was Joseph Jr. who passed away, killed in action.
Yep.
That's the oldest. And then there was John. And then, of course, Robert. And then Edward, the baby.
Yeah. And see, I used to imitate Kennedy, too. That's one of the reasons they wanted to get me to do some of their double stuff. And I used to do a pretty good Kennedy, I sure like to say, ask not what your country can do for you, but ask what you can do for your country. Now, a lot of people have confused me with my brother. My brother Bobby has a bit of a different New England accent compared to me. Bobby, greet the people. I should like to say that my brother John, would he's always taken the rubber swan in the bathtub, and the rubber swan belongs to me.
You're too much. That's funny. So let's get back to Edward. So no further attempts on his life, but for the most part, drank himself to death. And
yeah, they boxed him in.
Brief.
They put him on notice and boxed him in. You want to stay alive, toe the line. You can do a little bit, but you're limited.
Right. Yeah. Same thing with presidents-elects. They get the visit and get shown the film.
Yep. Yeah. And that's why they don't want Donald, because Donald, they tell him this is what you're going to do, and he's take a hike. You're fired.
Right. All right. Well, we're approaching an hour. Anything else you want to add to the Edward Teddy Kennedy story?
Not that I can think of right now, other than, people really need to, think about the whole picture. It is far too much not to be real. The flow and everything else. So people that don't want to believe it, because a lot of people don't want to believe it. We normally do not want to believe that our country has these problems. Russia did not want to believe that the Tsar of Russia would be overthrown. In the Bolshevik Revolution, less than 1,100 people, that's military and everything, 1,100 people overthrew the Tsar and Russia and formed the new Russia. That's all it took, 1,100 people. That's so incredible. America has really got to wake up. We have got to be willing to look at bad stuff and clean it up. It's kind of like a baby. Your baby poops his drawers. You don't throw the baby out because you don't want to face that stinky poop. You deal with it.
Some of them do now.
Yeah, some of them would. Some of them will. Yeah, But the right way to do it is deal with it.
Yeah,
raise
right.
that baby up to be a good adult and clean his or herself.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Some of the audience may or may not know, but Noel has been part of NSA and MJ-12, Majestic 12, and his memory sometimes it's good when he remembers, but there's things that they've blanked out of his memory that sometimes as we talk and discuss different things and he'll go off on a little rabbit trail, I give him leeway to get off because he may be going into a new memory, some new remembrance. Yep. And so I try to let him go as much as I can without getting too far off topic. So bear with us as we do this because there's a reason this format is being structured the way it is. So sometimes he's going to remember, sometimes we'll be talking about a completely different subject and he'll roll into something else. So it pertains to maybe a previous video or a previous discussion that we've had. And he's now getting that memory and it's clicking. And now two dots in his brain have come together and connected. And he's like, oh, okay, boom. And he can express it when he hadn't had that chance and ability before because it's been suppressed by the different departments, agencies, bureaus, whoever they are in our own government and military. Now, let me ask you this as a quick question as we head out for this video. Back in April, NASA discovered or rediscovered a 1959 top secret deep underground military base in Greenland. And in that underground military base, they had the Army Nuclear Power Program, ANPP, in which they used a portable nuclear reactor, which they call I believe it's a PM2A. Hang
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
Let me pull it up. Here we go. Just so you can look at it, because I'd never heard of any of this. Didn't know it
Yeah.
existed. Now, I just stumbled onto
Yeah.
this for
Yeah.
you right here.
We had some stuff in Greenland. We had some stuff actually in Sinop, Turkey. Greenland, Sinop, Turkey. And that's the cool thing about the way we do the interview and that, because it's kind of like interview and discovery at the same time. When you mention Greenland, Sinop, Turkey, Asmira, Ethiopia, and in Alaska. There was another one in
Yeah.
Alaska.
Huh?
Yeah, I can't remember the name of the place it
Oh,
was, but
it's in that Wikipedia. Yeah, all of them are in
yeah,
there.
yeah,
Oh yeah,
yeah,
yeah. That's
yeah.
that's pretty nuts.
And during
So,
my service, I visited all of them.
oh, okay. Well, we're gonna have to do a deep dive into deep underground military bases. So
Yeah.
let me put that in the queue. Wow, this is phenomenal.
Oh, and I also visited underground Roswell.
Okay. Well, yeah, we're
That's
definitely getting into Roswell. I have that one in the queue as well. So yeah, as we come across these topics and more information that I have no idea what
yeah.
we'll be documenting all of this. So, have you ever seen one of these portable nuclear reactors in action?
A little bit, yeah. Matter of fact, they had a demonstration thing out at White Sands one time.
Okay.
Yeah, and a small scale, but and and that and initially they were also experimenting with the sound laser. But
Oh
what
yeah.
they did and what they found, matter of fact, when they hit, they tried the nuclear deal and then they tried the sound laser. And the sound laser actually, when they went and took soil samples, there was not a single living organism in the soil sample.
What?
Yeah,
Sterilized it?
the nuclear reactor, some of the stuff would survive
Uh-huh.
and some of the stuff would change.
Right.
The sound laser, when it first started out, from a point of a pin, it would go out a mile, but it would go out like a cone, so it would reach out a mile, but it would also be a mile high, a mile wide, and a mile deep, like a big cone.
Okay. Like a megaphone.
Yeah, like a
Okay.
big cone. And
Uh,
everything, and trees just splintered, disintegrated. And when they tested the soil, there was the soil was as dead can be. And that's why they started working on turning it into a laser so they could restrict what gets hit.
I'm trying to think of what benefit that thing would be, but other than
Well, that's
destruction,
it. Sterilizing everything would be no benefit. You know,
no.
they could spell the end of life with sterilization.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, and they basically then they took mixed. Matter of fact, there was a lot of people didn't know what was going on. Then they brought in like live soil, and they were taking swipes of the dead soil and live soil and mixing the two together to get life to regenerate in the soil. And they had their excuse of whatever their explanation was for doing it. I forget. Some of it was, well, some of it had been radioactive and they were airing it out, but there was no danger to people. And they had all these excuses of what they were doing with all this soil, this big soil project.
Huh. Okay.
And that's because I'm being underground in Roswell. There's a guy named Bob Conzener, might still be alive. And if he's alive, he's on Facebook. You could even ask him. Tell him Noel Benoist told me to get a hold of you. Bob
Who?
Conzener, and they call
Wow.
him Conzo. And I told Bob the number of ships we had, the condition of each ship, the reverse engineering going on, and how one of them elevated and that what happened. I told him that because I wanted somebody to know they could back me up. And it was about 2 or 3 years later, he came to me at Goldfield, Ghost Town, and he said, Noel, you know this guy named Bob Lazar? And I said, Bob Lazar, Bob Lazar, Bob Lazar. He says, yeah, he was on a show named Art Bell. And I said, Art Bell sounds familiar, but Bob Lazar, Bob Lazar. And I said, yeah, Bob Lazar was reverse engineering at Roswell. He said, yeah, man. He said he was just on Art Bell and he described the exact same number of ships and the incident that you told me about 2 or 3 years ago. Now that's a big separation between two witnesses that did not get together, and that's called a murder conviction.
Okay, Bob Lazar's right after Dumbs. So definitely get in that. I can see Roswell's going to be an eventful show. All right. Well, that wraps up the presentation of the Kennedy brothers, a 3-part series involving the late President John F. Kennedy, Attorney General Senator Robert F. Kennedy, and Senator Edward Moore Kennedy. I had no idea his middle name was Moore. I wonder why they didn't like give him an F as well. So there you have it. We will come up. Next one will be Martin Luther King. So stay tuned for that. Staying in the Kennedy vein, we have Jackie O, Marilyn Monroe, a little MK Ultra to talk about. So we have some big shows coming up for you. Stay tuned. Anything you want to close with?
Other than I appreciate you, and I've been wanting to do this, and I've been feeling the leading of the Lord to do this for a long time. Number one, before I die and all of the information's lost. And number two, they've actually, well, I know that the slip and fall I had in Fernley, it was a setup because it was weaponized weather that brought a freezing rain. And then they had salt on every sidewalk except one, and that was the main entrance going into the door that I would go in. And when I stepped on that, I went down hard. And the DAT scan showed that I had a concussion, etc. And I was having memory problems. And I was starting to lose my memory. And then God led me to this deal. And at first I thought, well, it's a hoax or whatever. But they got this Zen Cortex. And so I started taking this Zen Cortex, and it works. If people are having a memory problem, or like, matter of fact, they even diagnosed me with as like Parkinsonism and memory problems. And I went ahead and tried this Zen Cortex. I figured, well, Lord, you must have led me there for a reason. And I've gone through 3 or 4 bottles. And I take a dropper in the morning, and then like a dropper full at lunch. And different people will have different levels of what'll do good for them. You know, you get too much, you get a little dizzy, woozy, whatever. Then you back off a little. And you find your dose. With anything, you find your dose. But actually, my memory now, if we would have had a much more difficult time, say 18 months ago. I was starting to go the other way again.
Wow.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, yeah, they're spraying us. They're making that happen. It's not by accident or evolution by any shape, form, or fashion.
Yeah. And when I was in Reno, they were hitting me with the sound laser because I could pick up the buzz of it in my ears. If you pick up a vibrating buzz in your ear, and that's why I started looking for stuff and I started taking vitamins, that vibrating buzz in your ear is the sound laser to lower your immune system. And they can turn it up at different frequencies and everything to do stuff. And I'm sure that it was a sound laser that took my dad, because every muscle in his heart exploded at the same time.
Wow.
And the coroner said he'd never seen anything like it.
All right. Well, they do have directed energy weapons as well. They've, mastered that technology.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's wrap this up. Thank you for being
Yeah.
here. Appreciate it. We'll see you on the next one with Martin Luther King. Stay tuned, folks. Thank you, Noel.
Amen. God bless.
All right, there you have it. Another one in the can, not yet in the books, but will be. I can't wait to co-author this book, The Pedagogy of Noel. And if you don't know what that means, it means the life of. That's what pedagogy means. So thought it was an apt title for him and his book and his life story. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, hit the notification bell, leave a comment below. Again, if you missed it for the mushroom therapy, here's the banner. Thank you, everyone, for being here. See you in the next video. Good night.